He's making his grand appearance.
All right, we're recording. Okie dokie, thanks, Deb. So, welcome to the course that features the transformations that took place under the leadership of George Letourneau. This would be from 1860 to 1906. Now, he was born in Quebec Province, Canada in 1831. Can you see me? All right.
Yes.
All right, so he was born in Quebec Province in 1831 and he died in 1906. You were all contemporary friends of his, so you also were born in 1831 in Quebec Province, and you're going to die in 1906 right here in the Kankakee River Valley. And as he makes decisions, there's going to be 7 of them, you're going to all make those decisions with him. This course is the 3rd in a series of courses called Local History 101, Making Life-Changing Decisions in the Kankakee River Valleys. If I stand right here, would this be okay?
Yes.
All right. So the first 2 courses are on the Bourbonnais Grove Historical Society YouTube channel. The first episode was Potawatomi Peril. This from the beginning, the 1700s to 1838. The second episode, Antebellum Abolitionist, was from 1838 to 1860. Now we're going from 1860 to 1906. So we're going to have this course divided up into 3 parts. You're going to be making some decisions with George Letourneau before 1860, after 1860 to when he died, and then you'll interact with him in a special way. Now, I'm sorry, I can't move around too much to be close to you, but I'm going to be here and all of you will get a chance to ask a question. So this is George Letourneau's photograph, and this is his home as depicted in the 1883 Atlas of Kankakee County. And it still looks like this today. Now I want you to pick a number from 1 to 10. Do that now, please. Pick a number from 1 to 10. You've got it in your mind. Say it over to yourself in your mind. 1 to 10. You've picked a number. Have you all picked it?
Yes.
All right. Now you know who you are. All right. If you pick 1, you're a farmer. 2, a shopkeeper. 3, a horse breeder. 4, a political official. 5, a Roman Catholic clergy. Nun or a priest. 6, a county law enforcement official. 7, a teacher. 8, a home worker. 9, a hired laborer. 10, a banker. Now, pick a name for yourself. Write it down, please. You were born in Quebec Province, Canada. As we go through the course, now tell me, Mary, if I walk off camera, all right? Just give me a sign of some sort. So when we go through the course, you're going to be making these decisions, and George Letourneau will prompt you to make the decision at a certain time, as he had to make the decision. Then you record your decision and just write down what it was. The first decision is one that we'll be making for a few minutes, not right away, but the decision is you're 16 years old. It's now 1847. You're living in Quebec Province. And as a French Canadian, you have to decide whether you're going to stay there and deal with the problems, and you'll find out what they are, or if you're going to risk going into the unknown by traveling to the United States of America, either to New England or more preferably maybe to the area called Bourbonnais in the Illinois country. And Illinois had become a state in 1818. Individuals in the Quebec province, though, of French-Canadian descent, were often asking, though, is Illinois in Bourbonnais? They knew more about Bourbonnais than they did about Illinois. Here you see the area where George Letourneau, and now I'm going to transition as George Letourneau, but not completely. I'm going to be in the transitionary medium. Bonjour, mon ami. Comment allez-vous? Oh, très bien. I will speak in the language that we have all come to know eventually, English. I will tell you now that I was born in this part of Quebec province. You can see on the larger map where Quebec province is located. And now, you know, the beautiful city of Quebec, overlooking the St. Lawrence River from the heights, again, from the chateau at the very heights looking down, and then the embankment. It's such a beautiful area. I was born in St. Thomas, Quebec, and I will show you that it was located right here, just a little north of Montreal. My father was a merchant, Joseph. My mother, Marguerite, she had married Joseph in her second marriage. Her first husband had died. And so she married Joseph Letourneau, and Marguerite brought with her 4 children, my stepbrothers and sisters, Jacques, Henri, and Joseph, and my stepsister Marguerite. We later moved to Henryville, Quebec province, where St. George Parish is located. Now, Henryville is located a bit south, and I will show you where that is located in a moment. My ancestor, David Letourneau, came over to Quebec province in the middle 1600s. He was originally from this area of France, the western part, the province of Poitou, and also you might notice the province of Bourbonnais. It was from this province that the Brunet family came in the 1600s to Quebec province, and they decided that they did not like the Brunet name anymore. They would name themselves Bourbonnais after this province in order to become more of a noble stature, an aristocratic stature. So the Bourbonnais name then took place in this family of the Brunet family. Before I was born, as you well know, the French colony included all of the area where you see the colonial flag. This was all New France. And you can see it began this history of New France. It became a colony in 1534. And then over the years, there was transitions, but it was a colony until 1803 when Napoleon Bonaparte sold it to the United States of America, maybe. And so this area has been called New France. It has been called Louisiana, Upper Louisiana, Lower Louisiana. It's been called the Illinois country. This area here where you see I put the state boundary. So a lot of the French Canadians came into the area of the Great Lakes in the 17 and the 1800s after the rivers, the waterways had been explored in the 1600s by various coureurs de bois, voyageurs, runners of the woods, voyageurs, in their canoes that they paddled, because the riverways were the transportation routes through this area. And they traded with the Native Americans. They traded pots and pans and blankets and trinkets for the furs, especially the beaver pelt, which was so water resistant. So we became very familiar with this area, and we enjoyed trading with the Native Americans. I knew this history and I enjoyed it well. The province of Quebec at one time in the 1770s included all of this region, Quebec province, where Quebec City and Montreal are located, and also the area down to the Ohio River and Mississippi. So it was not unfamiliar for we Quebecois to not know about this region in Bourbonnais. And eventually, after the United States of America became independent from Great Britain, the Northwest Territory was created, what had formerly been part of Quebec province. And so in the 1700s and 1800s, the fur trading posts were developed up north of Grand Marais, today Minnesota, and the Grand Portage area here. And then the American Fur Company at Mackinac Island. And look at the trade pellets and the trading post. Look at the birch wood that's been rolled up and then rolled out, and with the pit that's been mixed in various ways to seal the canoe. So the voyageurs had their transportation vehicle. And in Bourbonnais, the famous Bourbonnais family, Francois Sr. and his brother Antoine, had been employed by the American Fur Company. And I think it was Antoine who came into the Bourbonnais area, the Kankakee River Valley, for the first time in the 1820s. And so the settlement took the name of Bourbonnais after Antoine and then his brother, who came to live with his family. There you see his wife, Katish, and their children. She was Potawatomi. And then you see Noel Levasseur, another trader from the American Fur Company, and his partner, non-French Canadian, Gordon Hubbard. And so they set up a trading post in Buncombe, southeast of the Kankakee River Valley along the Iroquois River. And then they eventually came up north to the Bourbonnais area. Heading back to my situation at home, in the 1830s, there was a major crisis. The British were in control, and they had been since 1763, after the Great War for Empire. And they were in control of the economy, the politics. They were mostly entrepreneurs, businessmen and women. We French Canadians were farmers. We had lots of children because the Catholic Church said we should have all these children to help us with the farm. And so that was very agreeable until the arable land, the farmland, began to run out. And then it seemed like we didn't control the means of the economy, the productive means, but the British did. And so there was this rivalry. And my father was very political minded, and as a merchant got involved in some of these issues. And you can see where we lived at in Henryville, just across the border from the US. There's Montreal. This is where we lived in 1835, 1836. I was just 6 or 7 years old at the time, but there was a riot and they broke into my father's shop and our home. I never forgot that. Another problem that we experienced, not just the British this time, but the wheat midge and the potato blight. Look at that, the wheat midge, a little mosquito type insect that would go into the kernel of the wheat when nobody knew about it, when it was just beginning to become fertile. And it would consume, well, it would lay its eggs. And then the larvae would consume the kernel of wheat. And nobody knew about this until it was harvest time, and there was nothing there. 30 to 40% of the crop was destroyed by the wheat midge and the potato blight. Look at that potato leaf. And almost like in Ireland, we suffered immensely. So we had to make a decision. Should we stay or should we go? Now, time has moved on. It is 1847. We are 16 years old. Mon ami. Are we going to stay and deal with the problems that we have here in Quebec province? the problems with the British, the problems with the agriculture, the problems with the class system and the prejudice. What are we going to do? Or stay or move into the unknown? Now it's going to take us 5 weeks to move from Montreal by steamship down the Great Lakes to reach the portage at Chicago. But by now it's a thriving city in 1847. It had developed by Jean-Baptiste du Sable in 1779 when he built his cabin there along the Chicago River as it goes into the Lake Michigan. But then by the early 1800s, the Fort Dearborn was built. And so it was a developing entity. And by the 1847, we could go there. And Bourbonnais was only 56 miles further south, a short walk away. Chicago. It had grown in population. It was 100, had risen from 100 in 1830 to almost 4,500 in 1840. And John Deere had invented his cast steel plow in 1837. So a more productive way to till the soil, to open the prairie that had been virgin to this point. Oh, the opportunities. And so the Mecca of the Midwest, what an oasis Bourbonnais was to all of us. And so Bourbonnais Grove was the place to go. Now it was called Bourbonnais Grove because of the 12-mile-long stand of trees from Chief Shawanassi's village, today your Kankakee River State Park, to today your Cobb Park in the city of Kankakee, 12 miles. Bourbonnais Grove was quite big and quite long. So we decided that this was the place to go. In 1846, just a year before we arrived, there were 22 French-Canadian families that lived in Bourbonnais Grove. And just a year later, in the records of St. Leo's Parish, which had been built in 1841, there were 77 French-Canadian families of 471 persons. And by the way, you do not need to write all of these details down because I am being told by Professor Paul that all of this narrative will be on the Bourbonnais Grove Historical Society website, YouTube channel. I don't know how this all works, but the slides and the complete narrative will be there. What's interesting, this number 471, the population of Bourbonnais would only go up to 595 until 1957. It would not grow for various reasons, but we will talk about that. You see the views of the Kankakee River? Oh, what a beautiful, fertile area it was. And so we came, and when I arrived, St. Leo's Chapel was the place where we attended church in 1847. By the way, I did not tell you about this. I had met at St. George Elementary School while we were going there, a girl who became my childhood sweetheart, Elodie. And when I left for the United States for Bourbonnais, we had already exchanged vows of loyalty, and she gave me a lock of her hair. And her family arrived, their last name, Langlois. They arrived in 1848, a year after I did. Oh my. Well, didn't have a lot of money at this point in time, but that opportunity will present itself, I will show you. And so, Noël Vasseur, before St. Leo's Chapel, had the first Mass celebrated in his classical revival style house, which was demolished in the 1880s to make way for Roy Memorial Chapel on the campus of St. Viator College. And it was just a hop, skip, and jump away from the new Maternity of the Blessed Virgin Mary Church, St. Viator College, over this way, where his house was located. And this church was completed in its new construction in 1858. After St. Leo's Chapel, a new frame church was built called, in 1849, dedicated as Maternity of the Blessed Virgin Mary Church, but it burned to the ground in 1853. It's a bit of a controversy as to why it burned to the ground. I will talk about that in a moment. But let's just suffice it to say, this is the church in the 1883 Atlas of Kankakee County, and this is the rectory that once stood in its Italianate revival style. After Noel Levasseur home was demolished, Roy Memorial Chapel was built, but on February the 21st, 1906, just a few months before I died, it burned to the ground. Well, they replaced it with a dormitory, and at St. Viator College, it was named Roy Hall. Eventually, St. Viator College went into bankruptcy, and Olivet Nazarene College purchased that campus. They renamed Roy Hall as Chapman Hall. I understand you can visit Chapman Hall as a dormitory still today, and know exactly where Noel Levasseur's home was located. Now our next decision. Well, it's now 1850. We are 19 years old. Gold has been discovered in California. Should we stay or should we go and make our fortune? Farming is nice. We can work in the hard goods stores. That's wonderful. We can breed the Percheron horses. We can do all these things to make money, but oh my, let's go to California and find our fortune. Are you with me on this? 12 of us decided yes. 6 from Romance and 6 from Bourbonnais. And we headed off. We went. We got our horses and wagons. We traveled overland all this way, risking our lives, fighting off savage marauders, protecting all of our supplies until we made it to the gold mine region. In September of 1850, I need to tell you about the Flavian Nadeau incident, I'm sorry. September of 1851, it happened. I decided I wasn't going to make my fortune in gold mining. That was a lot of work. I decided the way to do it would be in quartz mining, supplying especially everything from pickaxes to pickles to those quartz miners. And I did, and I made my fortune. And my friends and I bought interest in the quartz mines, and it was one of the most successful quartz mines in California, maybe even in the world. Well, in September 1851, I was taking supplies up to Northern California to a spot right there where the arrow is called Chasty, C-H-A-S-T-Y. It was a little quartz mining area. And I had my 4 horses and my wagon, and I had all the supplies. You imagine all the wheat and all this. So I unloaded it, and I slept in the wagon, so I wasn't on the ground because this is primitive territory. And in the middle of the night, I was awakened. Yeah! And I couldn't believe it. There were 2 men, I found out they were both French-Canadian, being chased by Indians. And one had an arrow sticking in his neck. So I pulled out my 6-shooters, I had 2 of them, and I fired away at nothing in particular, but scared the assailants away. And that was my purpose, and to awaken the other miners and get some help. Well, we pulled the arrow out, and this is in the middle of the night, and he survived. The next morning, though, we noticed it was so infected because we hadn't gotten all the wood out of the arrow, all the splinters. So I decided I would take him in my wagon, the 250 miles to Sacramento for medical treatment. It took us 5 days. He wasn't terribly off all the time because he could walk a bit at the time. But nonetheless, he was in bad shape. We got to Sacramento and I turned him over to the doctor. And I thought, oh, this is all I can do. I'm going to finish my work here and I'll continue on. Well, I thought that was the end of it. Until over 40 years later, in 1894, sadly, I had gone with my family to Concordia, Kansas for my daughter's funeral. And in the midst of all this, my family said, there's someone we want to reintroduce you to. I thought, what? And so they took me to this house. And there was Flavian Nadeau, alive and well with all those years. And what a reunion we had. So special. Well, I eventually, in 1852, left California. We traveled by steamer down along the Pacific coast. We crossed the Isthmus of Panama on foot through the jungle. There was no canal at that time. And then we boarded another steamer up to New Orleans, went up the Mississippi River, caught the Illinois River, went to the Illinois and Michigan Canal that was there. That took us to the LaSalle, Peru area, where we were then escorted and taken by carriage back to Bourbonnais. And I arrived home in July, and guess what? Elodie and I were married a month later. And maternity of the Blessed Virgin Mary Church. There we are. We had 11 children that we cared for. We had one grandson that we also cared for. His name was Albert. My oldest son, George Jr., had married Lucie Levasseur, the daughter of Noel and Ruth Levasseur, but she contracted consumption, which a lot of people did in my time, also called tuberculosis. And she died. So my son, George, asked us to care for Albert, to help him cure. And so he lived with us also. You'll see a picture of all of my children in a few minutes. And so I worked in a hard goods store with Alexander Tetsu. Elodie and I had gone to see my mother and father in Henryville in, I guess you could call it a honeymoon trip after our marriage in the fall of 1852. I'm glad we did because she died the following November. My father, Joseph, eventually came to live with us in the home that you now know is in Bourbonnais still. And he died there in the 1860s. While we were in our home, which I purchased in 1854, it was just a primitive pioneer structure farmhouse. Nothing really to say much about. But in this pioneer structure farmhouse, we had our children. And we sang our songs. And I think you know these songs, don't you? This one, the first one, was a voyageur song that was used by the voyageurs as they paddled their canoes. Alouette, gente, alouette, alouette, gente plumaré. Jete plumare latte, jete plumare latte, 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 alouette. Alouette is a skylark, gentle skylark. We pluck your feather, les plumare, jete plumare latte from your head, and so it goes. Does it make sense? It's a nice rhythm. And then Frere Jacques, you know Frere Jacques, don't you? Frere Jacques, dormez-vous, dormez-vous, sante la matina, ding ding dong. And what about Sur les ponts d'Avignon? Sur les ponts d'Avignon, longy dancer, sur les ponts d'Avignon, longy dancer, tout en rond. I think you know the words, Brother John, or Brother James, Jacques is James, Brother James, are you sleeping, are you sleeping? Sleep, and the morning bells are ringing, waking us up. Sur les ponts d'Avignon, on the bridge of Avignon, that's in France. And we're dancing on the bridge. Yes, we should dance and dance and dance all around. Nice songs. And this is our pioneer structure that we purchased in 1854. And we lived in it until about 1883 when I was elected Kankakee County Sheriff. And we had to move into Kankakee because, of course, the sheriff and the sheriff's wife, family, had to live in the jail and care for the inmates. There's a big controversy that happened at this time. And now you have to decide whether you will follow Father Charles Chiniquy or not follow him. He came to Bourbonnais about 1851 when he eventually said to the pastor of maternity of the Blessed Virgin Mary Church, I need to survey the land and see how many parishioners you have. And I'd like to bring some more parishioners from Quebec province and Belgium and other places to settle in this area. And I'm going to go down to the Beaver Creek area in the Iroquois River Valley and see if there's area there that we can also settle. And then he eventually became pastor of the Maternity of the Blessed Virgin Mary Church for about a year, 1852 to 1853. And he got into some trouble, though, while he was here doing this good work of recruiting more French Canadians to this area. Got into trouble with the Irish Bishop of Chicago, Anthony O'Regan. And the issue was over. There wasn't just one. He, Father Chiniquy, wanted the French language in the liturgy, not just Latin. He felt that lay people should have access to the Bible. He felt that there should be democratization of the Roman Catholic Church, what was called trusteeism. He felt that the Irish bishop and others had a lot of prejudice against French Canadians, the priest and the laity. One thing led to another. Father Chiniquy, in 1852, shortly after the church burned to the ground, Maternity of the Blessed Virgin Mary Church, left with 3 families, 3 French Canadian families in Bourbonnais. Father Chiniquy was also opposed to drinking. He was supporting temperance. Oh, I see, I did put that there, yeah, yes. So anyway, he went down to St. Anne where he had already recruited, can you believe this, between 900 and 1,000 French Canadian families in a 40 square foot area around St. Anne. He was so charismatic. They were all abolitionists. I support that myself. Now you have to decide. Do you follow Father Chiniquy, or, as you see, Bishop O'Regan suspended and then excommunicated him in September of 1856? Do you support his excommunication from the Roman Catholic Church? I understand some French Canadians still refer to him as that gray priest. Now you must decide. Time goes on. 1853, what a momentous year. On July 4th, 1853, the Illinois Central train steam locomotive came across the bridge in Kankakee, what we know as Kankakee. It was nothing then. July 4th, 1853. There was no population in Kankakee. You can see the population figures in 1850. In Bourbonnais Township, 1,720. Most of them, 80%, were French Canadian. In 1853, Kankakee County was formed. I helped form it, 8,000 the population. 1880, Bourbonnais Township, still gone down, 1,589. Kankakee's population, oh my, look at that, skyrocketing population. Bourbonnais Township going down. Kankakee skyrocketing, Bourbonnais Township going up. But the village of Bourbonnais, 595, and it would remain that, as I said before, until 1957. The village of Bradley had been formed in the late 1800s and was already above population of Bourbonnais. And look at Kankakee in 1900. Now, your question number 4, do you favor or oppose the rapid growth of the city of Kankakee caused by the coming of the railroad? There was a growth in the Bourbonnais settlement area, north-south along the Kankakee River, and then going over to the east to Momence, then going south along the Iroquois River. That's the way the settlements were going. But now it was a direct north-south. The Illinois Central Railroad would dictate the population growth centers. So how do you feel about that? As my friends, French Canadians, do you favor the rapid growth of the city of Kankakee, or do you oppose the rapid growth? Are you resentful or are you supportive? You've made your decision. Straight up. I was on the ballot. You see my name at the bottom in 1860. This is the Republican ballot, Abraham Lincoln's name at the top. I had become a Republican when the party was formed. And by 1856, Noel Vassar could not go to the Republican convention in Bloomington. And so I took his place. I met the rail splitter for the first time. He was 47, I was in my 20s. So impressive. And he gave the famous lost speech. Nobody took notes because they were so spellbound. It was that speech, I think you know, that a house divided against itself cannot stand. He gave that speech later at the Springfield Republican Convention in 1858. People did write down the words then. I had already been a Bourbonnais Township supervisor, and so I thought I'd run for a county office, Kankakee County coroner, get my foot in the door. And so, even though my name is misspelled, oh well, I was elected, along with that man at the top of the ticket. And so all of my political offices, you can see I was township supervisor for many years, a delegate to that convention in Bloomington in 1856. The Republican Party was split in 3 parts. The radical or Black Republicans like me, that and almost all the French Canadians in Bourbonnais that supported abolition. The moderate Republicans like Lincoln, who were free soilers. They felt that when a new territory opened up, the people there should decide whether they're free or slave. They, the moderates, did not think that abolition was right or slavery was right. They were both too extreme. And then there were the conservative Republicans who felt that slavery was definitely bad, but it was bad because it was an impediment to progress and would hurt the white people eventually. I felt abolition was correct. Slavery was immoral. Even Great Britain, no matter what we say about the British, abolished slavery in their empire in 1833. And the Roman Catholic Church since the 5th century has been opposed to slavery. My other positions, coroner, circuit clerk, first mayor of Bourbonnais in 1875, later Kankakee County Sheriff, County Treasurer, Mayor of Kankakee, 1891 to 2, State Senator under, as a Republican, under the governorship of John Peter Altgeld. And then at the time I died, I was Deputy County Treasurer. I was very active in the state legislature for the unions, and I was on several committees that helped work with the unions. This is like a few years after the Haymarket riots in 1886 that I served in the Illinois legislature. So it was important and necessary that we address the needs of the union workers. The issue came up in 1875. Should we as a village of Bourbonnais incorporate or remain unincorporated? The arguments for yes, well, we would have autonomy, we could raise revenue and taxes, we would have better services and more efficient record keeping. But there were those that said, no, we'll have more freedom if we don't have a village administration and the taxes and the regulations and restrictions of all these different groups, less government regulation, lower taxes. You must decide now. Friends of mine, do you support or oppose Bourbonnais becoming an incorporated village? You see the Percheron horses that we raised on my farm? By this time I had 200 acres. My farm was located on North Main Street in Bourbonnais. Where that funeral home is in your time, your later time, the Clancy Gurnan Funeral Home parking lot is where my home was. Did you make your decision? I did. 35-1 was the vote. And I was chosen as the first mayor. I did not vote against incorporation. I worked in the hard goods business with Noel Brasso for a while, and the grain business. I worked with Hiram Kanaga. I was in the grocery business for a while, and I co-authored this book with William Kanaga, an encyclopedia of Kankakee County history. You can see the sites that I was so fond of. You can see where the religious center was located, Eternity of the Blessed Virgin Mary Church. And you can see where my home was located and my property and some of the 200 acres that we own. St. Vitus College sprang up, and it happened this way. After the log schoolhouse, the first educational institution in Bourbonnais Grove closed in 1848 after 11 years, there wasn't any education in Bourbonnais until about 1860. There were attempts to have education in the 1850s, but it just didn't really get much traction. But in 1860, the nuns of the Congregation of Notre Dame came, and they began teaching girls. And in 1865, the Viatorian order, priests and brothers came to teach boys. And they began teaching in the public schools by 1868. There was no difference between public and parochial. It was all together. and the Viatorians were the teachers. And the Viatorians also started this higher education where languages and philosophy and history and music would be taught. And in 1874, it got its charter as a college university from the Illinois legislators, St. Viator College. This is the college. There you see Maternity of the Blessed Virgin Mary Church. There you see Roy Memorial Chapel on the site of Noah Levasseur home. Burned down in February 21st, 1906. Rebuilt as Roy Hall in that same year. And under Olivet Nazarene College administration, renamed Chapman Hall. My children, I do not have time to go through all of their resumes and their characteristics and traits. Most of them outlived me. Some died before I did. Two of my daughters were with me after Elodie died in 1887 at the age of 53. And we worked together. We lived in Kankakee at the time. I'll show you the house in a moment. All of my children, again, this narrative will be complete on that Bourbonnais Grove Historical Society YouTube channel. My sons, my wife, we gathered at her funeral in 1887. George Jr., Robert, Oswald, myself, Arthur, Philip, who was married to Mary of Lesage, daughter of Joseph and Julie Lesage, the first French-Canadian family to live in the log schoolhouse after it wasn't a school anymore. My grandson, Albert, who I told you about earlier. My daughters, Eugenie, Elizabeth, Corinne, Louise, Agnes, and Marie. What a beautiful family. Yeah. The next decision you have to decide, was J. Herman Hardebeck a self-promoting hustler or a hero of a community revitalization? There he is, J. Herman Hardebeck. He was a realtor, he was a speculator, and in 1891, when I was mayor of Kankakee, Republican, my city council was all Democrat, there was a headline in the Kankakee Gazette. Hardebeck, the hustler, has a big scheme in hand, nearly 1,000 acres under contract. North Kankakee subdivision with factories announced. Well, I was very much in favor of it, as was the Republican editor of the Kankakee Gazette. Expansion, bringing in more population, more factories was good for the community. And so there was an impasse we had reached, though. The road, which didn't exist, that should have existed, from Kankakee along what is today Schuyler Avenue to North Kankakee was blocked by a farm owned by Dietrich Eric. And it seemed like no one could find a way to get a road going. So I said, what we have to do is declare it eminent domain. Condemn it. And we did. And so the road was open. So Hardebeck also was an advocate for the trolley system that would allow you to travel from Kankakee to Bourbonnais in a half an hour. And he, of course, campaigned for North Kankakee. But there was a panic of 1893, which we all suffered from, and Kankakee didn't have resources to help Hardebeck. He had to do it on his own, and he was doing it on his own. It seemed pretty well until his bubble burst, also in '93. And it was all going to go down the drain. The bubble had burst. But he and a group of business people went up to Chicago and talked to J. Harley Bradley, the grandson of David Bradley. And they had a big factory up there in Chicago. And Hardyback asked, along with these other business individuals, if the Bradley Manufacturing Company would think about coming to North Kankakee since they needed a bigger site to expand. And they agreed. In 1895, the North Kankakees were so delighted, they changed the name to Bradley. What is your decision about Hardyback? Here you see the streetcar going up to Bourbonnais. There you see the new Kankakee Railroad Depot built in 1898. This is my home in Kankakee on Greenwood Avenue. This is where I lived with Elodie after we moved into Kankakee. And this is where, after she died, my daughters and I lived. And we had all kinds of social events because I could not stay home. I had an active career and I enjoyed that, and I began to write. I did eventually succumb to kidney disease called Bright's disease in December of 1906. I was 75 years old. I'm buried in the Maternity of the Blessed Virgin Mary Cemetery. There's our family plot. I'm located right there. There you can see my dates. The last question is one that troubles me the most before I entertain you and allow you to ask questions. I must say that this one is most bothersome for me. I have fought against the prejudice against we French Canadians for many, many years. The reasons for the prejudice: foreign birth, foreign language, Roman Catholic, dominated by priests and nuns, inward-looking population, not concerned with others, little interest in education or better housing, low degree of both geographical and social mobility, minimal expectations, unwillingness to get involved with strikes or other union activities, low rates of naturalization and resistance to assimilation. What do you think? Your decision now. Do you quietly subdue yourself and succumb to the prejudice against you? Or do you challenge it and speak out against it? Think about this. Write your answer down. I will find a moment to speak with you, but please work on your answer for a moment. I am back now. I did not always have a gray beard. We are visiting with each other in a different dimension, although we have known each other all of our lives, may we? But just to refresh my memory, could you mention your name and your occupation? Because after death, something happens to my brain cells. So if you could kindly remind me, and people online also remind me of your name and your occupation, and you can ask me anything you wish. Dear lady, would you like to start first?
I'm number 7, a teacher.
Oh,
and
my.
My name is Jean. And I guess I would say What was the area like where you were born? Of course, it's all primitive because it's trees and brush and stuff like that. What about the animals at that time when you were 16 and growing up?
Thank you very much for this question. St. Thomas and Henryville, dear teacher Jane, was very small population, just a few thousand people. It was an agricultural community. Both of them were agricultural communities, much like, interestingly, the St. George community in your area today. Similar to that, and close knit.
Now, when you say in the burial, your plot there, it said 1/4 of a mile from the river. Is that out in the state park area?
No, it's in Bourbonnais along a road called, I do not know if I can come up with the name of the road.
I forgot about that.
Yes, is it Canterbury or something like this? Oh, merci beaucoup. Canterbury.
Oh.
Canterbury. Thank you for your question. And you, sir?
I'm also a teacher. My name is Robert. And I was wondering, at the time when you first arrived at that young age, there was a lot of, like you say, for pelts and the beavers and different things. Was there any, what about what I call fishing and use of the rivers and the interconnecting waterways?
Yes, most definitely. Hunting was part of the lifestyle of the Potawatomi, as well as we French Canadians, but fishing, oh, the river, the Kankakee and the Iroquois and the creeks, so full, abundant fish. Oh, yes, most definitely. Thank you, sir, for your question, Robert. And you, Madame?
Number 5, I'm a Roman Catholic nun.
Oh, pleased to meet you, dear sister.
Sister Denise.
Sister Denise.
And I really, right at this point, I don't have any major questions.
How did you feel about Father Chiniquy?
I'm not sure.
He did trouble us all, didn't he?
Yes.
He split our church in two. I like some of the things he had to say, but not others. I myself was unwilling to follow him, but.
Well, I was more aggressive in my thinking. So
Oh,
I followed.
I will not push you in this. I will not press you because you might get into trouble with some of the other friends of ours.
Probably.
This split our community asunder in 1853. Families would not talk to families for years or maybe forever. Some of the same family members split. One went, one didn't. Same family surname.
And it troubled my heart.
Yes. And you, dear lady.
Well, I'm number 6 in law enforcement, and I was married to an assistant sheriff. He was an assistant in 82 when the Letourneau was the sheriff. We had a lot of peaceful times because Letourneau was a good sheriff. And my husband came.
You're speaking about me, are you not?
Yes,
Oh,
you were a very good.
very
sheriff.
good.
Yeah, you were a good sheriff. My husband.
I love to have
was the
compliments.
assistant. And I was his wife, and he first came home and told me things were better. You know, people weren't fighting as much about the Civil War past and the Roman Catholic division. Now, I happen to support Chiniquy. My name is Overseen, and my father came from Canada, my grandfather. Quebec, and his name was Overseen. So my family was steeped in that, but we did follow. My father had been born in Beaverville, And we were big supporters of you. We voted for you every time, but we didn't follow Chiniquy.
That is very interesting that you bring up this dichotomy within our French Canadian community. We have so many things in common and so similar interests and supports. We are all abolitionists, and we all have certain feelings about Chiniquy, one way or the other, supporting his excommunication or following him. I respect your decision, dear Madame. Thank you. And you, sir?
I'm number 5, Father Chiniquy,
Oh, my.
Big guy here.
and I understand that you do not agree with my move, but we did have a great following, and I think we did some good deeds. And I wonder if you reconsidered your decision.
I am so supportive of your position on abolition. I support your other ideas, being a radical Republican. I'm a bit progressive. I support the democratization of the Roman Catholic Church. I disagree with the temperance issue. I mean, if we went and took it piece by piece, like on a buffet table, we would have maybe as many likes as dislikes, but I respect you as a person. I think you did what you had to do. You raised important issues, not only in the Roman Catholic Church, but in our community as to what was the true deep values that we stood for.
Did you attend church regularly?
Yes, I
before
did.
left?
And my daughters attended the Notre Dame Academy, a convent academy. My sons attended St. Viator College. Yes. Thank you, sir, for your question. And you, lady,
My name is Samantha, and I'm actually a law enforcement official. And I was just wondering, when I have to chase the criminals, Bourbonnais is really swampy land compared to Kankakee. And I noticed as we became our own town, was there any move to try to make Bourbonnais easier to get around it? Is that why the Kankakee population was so much higher, because the land was actually better and easier to get around?
no. And what was your name, madam?
Samantha.
Samantha, Madam Samantha. Kankakee blossomed because the railroad entrepreneurs purchased land around the railroad, and they said this is where the city is going to be built. The commercial center became Kankakee, like it or not, that's the way it was. After Bourbonnais became a village and incorporated, we began to develop a sanitary system, a sewage system. And we tried to work those swampy elements out. Sadly, it's not complete, even in your day. Thank you for your question. And you also, dear lady.
My name is Jeanette,
Jeanette.
and I am a teacher. I was wondering if you would speak out against the prejudice. If so, how can we?
And what did you say your name was?
Jeanette,
Jeanette. And what is your occupation?
teacher.
Jeanette, the teacher. You asked me a very powerful question. Can I ask you to wait for a few minutes, because I'm going to end my experience with you with that answer. Thank you for your question. I know that now you anticipate something. And you also, dear lady.
I'm a teacher also,
Oh, my.
and my name is Ramon.
Ramon.
And I was wondering if you could tell me anything about any Protestant churches that were first brought to the area.
Oh, yes. When I came in 1847, the Methodist Church was very active. They had circuit riders coming to the area from the 1830s and 40s already. They had their meetings in the former Locke Schoolhouse on South Main Street in Bourbonnais. So they were there, they were prominent. Other Protestant religions were also coming, but that is the one that I would like to have you recognize as first and foremost. They were also abolitionists. There's a Quaker family that owned what you now call the Prairie Farm. They were the Durham family, Thomas and Margaret. They were Quakers. Keep those two in mind. Others would come, Presbyterians. Of course, Father Chiniquy is associated with Presbyterians, evangelicals, and so on. But please keep the Quakers and the Methodists in mind as first and foremost of the ones that I personally interacted with. Thank you. And you, sir?
Father Boucher, contemporary of Father Chiniquy. I was disappointed in his decision to leave the area. Some valid points, yes. But I think the divisiveness, the reduction of population to the area was difficult for those that stayed behind. There could have been changes made, but given the structure at that point in time, it was unfortunate he made that decision.
So your commentary puts you on the excommunication side of Father Chiniquy, I assume,
Oui.
Father Boucher. Did you have any difficulty with the statement I made earlier about my partial support of Father Chiniquy?
There were elements of which, I could understand, French versus Latin, access to the Bible, and what have you. But unfortunately, within the structure of the church, there really was no alternative but to excommunicate Father from teaching.
You were a loyal servant, Father Boucher.
We
Thank you for your commentary and your statement. And dear lady, what is your question? And please remind me of your name and occupation.
Francisca,
Francisca.
and I'm a homework.
And did you have a question for me?
No,
Do you think that I paid enough attention to female home workers?
I would assume that the home worker was somewhat unnoticed, unnecessary helpmate in the home. But
How were your political interests voiced?
I would not have gone to, and that's not political, but I would not have gone traipsing over land and sea to get to California. I have my priorities straight, and I would just stay here for the night.
You were happy?
I'm not sure that that was actually considered at that time. You just did your job.
Happiness was not considered during our lifetime?
Probably as a workman or a work person, if you did your job, you get satisfaction.
Are you married?
At this time, when you said I was 16, I was not.
You seem like a person with a lot of interests and concerns, and I would be glad to talk with you further. I hope that I, as a political leader, can address some of the issues that you think are important and valuable. Can I say more?
If you're going to talk.
And
We have a question from the
I
chat.
know, can I finish these two?
Yes.
Can you ask our individuals in the invisible realm to wait one moment?
Absolutely.
My name is Matilda and I'm a law enforcement person also. I guess my question to you is, of all the many positions you held throughout your lifetime, which was the most meaningful to you? Was one of them more rewarding to you than any of the others?
They were also important. The position as mayor in Bourbonnais and then Kankakee stands out, but also my time as a state legislature, a state senator. I was able to connect with so many other individuals in the state of Illinois and do a lot of special work, especially for the unions. I was on the appropriation committee as well. I would say those two, mayorships and the state senator position. Thank you. Appreciate your question. And you, sir?
My name is Chalk. Once again, a local law enforcement. And my question was, are you disappointed that the railroad did not go through Bourbonnais?
I am not.
Why not?
I value our community, our village, its educational institutions. It actually was the center of education of the Kankakee River Valley. It remains so even when Kankakee developed. Commercial development, economic development is important. But there are other values in life than economic and commercial values. I think in our community of Bourbonnais, we have those family values near here. Thank you for your question, sir. Jacques. And now let us enter the realm of the other speakers who are not physically present.
So Sir Wayne wants to know, a long career in politics, did it corrupt you in your life?
Never. I was a person of integrity. I was upright. I was honest. I would hope that that would be part of my eulogy. Thank you, dear Wayne. I do not know your contemporary name as a friend of mine, but possibly his name is Wayne as well. Did you have a question from the other individuals? Well, I still have not answered dear Jeanette's question. Have I?
Mr. Letourneau.
I would like to read my Patriot Manifesto. We have had a great interaction. I think it's important that you know me not as only a farmer, grain merchant, miner, grocery person, politician, but as a patriotic American. I wrote this in the Kankakee Gazette in the late 1890s. One Saturday night in April 1899, the West Side Republicans presented their slate of candidates to the public over at Supranauts Hall. They were kind enough to ask me to say a few words on behalf of Colonel Clark, who was running for mayor of Kankakee at that time. I did so, after which I gave the audience, mostly working men, a reminder of their duties as citizens of one of the finest countries of the world. The Kankakee Daily Gazette flattered me by printing my sharp talk in their paper. Here is what I said that Saturday evening back in 1899. I have lived within 2 miles of this hall since I was 15 years of age. I told them I have lived in Kankakee 16 years. I moved here in 1883. At that time, I was elected Kankakee County Sheriff. I have worked on the farm, I have been through the mill. I want to say to you that the right of suffrage is the most sacred privilege conferred upon an American citizen. If you wish to make the laws, it is you who make the laws. By your votes, you choose the men to carry out your principles. If there is any complaint against the laws or the manner in which they are administered, you have yourselves to blame. You can, under the primary system, vote for any man you choose, and no one can find out how you vote. Your ballot is sacred and it counts just as much as the vote of the millionaire. Having therefore this high privilege, this sacred duty, this great power, you ought to consider it an insult if any man comes to you with the offer of a cigar or a glass of beer to influence your vote. It is equivalent to telling you in so many words that he has no confidence in your honesty and intelligence or ability to determine for yourself what is right. Another thing, don't wait for a carriage to be sent to drag you to the polls. The value of the franchise is so great, so important that you ought to make it the first duty of the day after kissing your wife, if you have one, to go to the polls with a free step and your head held erect and cast your ballot. Now, I've also translated the Declaration of Independence into French for some of you who still can't read English. And I understand you're speaking French in our community until the 1960s. So be it. I've also asked you to please no longer celebrate Independence Day as St. John the Baptist National Holiday of Canada in mid-June. It is July 4th. That's our national holiday. Now, getting to Madame Jeanette's question. I have been so troubled.
Is Beaverville, the current Beaverville south of here, was it part of this and part of
It
yours?
was Father Chiniquy's domain, and St. Mary's Church did remain Catholic. Although that was a problem. It wasn't until the 1870s that Catholicism was able to reassert itself in that area because his church had become Presbyterian. Thank you for your question. Now back to the issue of prejudice. I am so bothered by this. It's the one transformation I don't know if I handled well enough. In 1901, I wrote this in the Kankakee Daily Gazette. The first French Canadian settlers encountered many obstacles that greatly retarded their advancement. And you can relate to this as French Canadians. The principal one was because of their foreign birth and their foreign language, and also their religious belief. But I thank God that those prejudices have disappeared, never to be known again. The people in those early days were not accustomed to mingle with foreign-born people. The French Canadians of this country have been well represented in the public affairs for many years with the honor to themselves and county. And they've been represented in all types of levels of government, local, community, and state, but never national. That is stuck in my craw. There has not been one French Canadian in national office, even though they have applied for that position. They've done well in areas of commerce, banking, real estate, and so on. But I'm troubled by that. And let me say this. Of all the transformations that I have experienced in my life, the most difficult was challenging prejudice against weak French Canadians and others. I have stood up against this unenlightened prejudice since I arrived in this country in 1847. I hope that I have been a living example of this prejudicial ignorance, my friends, mon ami. I implore you to continue speaking out and awakening others to the immorality of prejudice and racism. I remain optimistic, as I wrote in 1901. The world nationality is fast disappearing, as it is better realized now than it has ever been before, that we are one people, living, prospering, and enjoying the same respect, liberty, and advantages under the same flag, the stars and stripes. Mon ami, my friends, please help all of us to continue this legacy and heritage. I bid you now, I do. Now he's going. If you want to stick around, you can ask me questions. If you need to go, you can go.
The stone building up there by the police department and the post office.
Yes, the
Was
French.
that an original?
Mhm. That
And
was the,
it's now a museum or something?
yes, that was Lemuel